The worst Pokemon games and why by MandJTV. Now, before we get into this, I'm going to be doing my best to be as fairly impartial and unbiased as I can. I did have my criticisms with, I'm assuming this is Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, which, yeah, we can confirm that. I enjoyed it. I had parts I didn't like about it. I definitely have criticisms about it. But do I think they're the worst? I think that might be a little bit of a stretch, so I wanted to just right out the gate kind of clarify my stance on that, right? I got like less than 100 hours out of it, so I didn't really play it as much as I did, say, Shield, for example. But I'm curious to hear what his opinions are.
I am not normally someone who is highly critical of Pokemon games. I've heard plenty of criticisms of X and Y being too easy, Oris lacking a battle frontier, Sun and Moon having too many unskippable cutscenes, Sword and Shield's bland wild area, and Scarlet and Violet's glitches. I acknowledge those flaws with those games, but generally, I like the games as a whole, and I still enjoy going back to play them. So it should carry a lot of weight when I say that 3 years ago, Pokemon released the worst mainline games ever. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl.
Poor Onyx.
I consider them so irredeemable that I refuse to ever play through them again. And I play through Pokemon as my job. In this video, I'll explain my reasoning for that opinion, but I'm saving my most controversial reason for last.
I think this is incredibly fair, and this is honestly how you do it. And that being said, if you think Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl are great games, and they're your favorite in the series, you are also entitled to that opinion. I think that this is how discourse works, right? And I love videos like this, because you get to see... This is actually why this is like my actual favorite job, to just like do YouTube streaming, etc. Because I get to hear so many different opinions. Don't get me wrong, some people have some dumb opinions, but like this is how this is supposed to work. This is how discourse and conversation work, and everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Like, oh, this is gonna be great.
The first thing I must address is my definition of worst, because an understandable counter could be Red and Blue are objectively worse games. And that is generally true. BDSP have the quality of life improvements that have been added in the many years since Red and Blue came out.
So I'm sure what's gonna come into this is like the Lorelei lock, Oak's parcel glitch, 1 in 256 glitch, right? Focus energy not doing what it says, where instead of upping your crit rate, it lowers your crit rate. Things like that is what I assume is being referred to here, as well as a non-existent post-game. But, you know, that's usually considered by, like, the game of the era, right? You can't necessarily consider something like, you know, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis to Resident Evil Village, right? Like, sure, they're in the same series, and there's, you know, some DNA in there, but, like, the era is just different. You can't compare Ocarina of Time on a technological level to I was almost said Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild, right? Like, they're fundamentally different games. I'd argue they're even different genres at that point, with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom sharing more in common with Zelda 1, from what I understand.
Better Pokemon storage, the physical special split, character customization, the removal of HMs, etc. On those fronts, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are better games. However, part of how I judge a Pokemon game is how it improves upon its predecessors. I cut Gen 1 a lot of slack because they were the first games, and they're almost 30 years old. BDSP should not get credit for quality of life improvements that were added in games that came long before them. So yes, not needing HMs is an improvement over the original Diamond and Pearl, but that's a low bar to clear, since Sun and Moon removed HMs 5 years prior. It's an improvement, but it's one that is, or at least should be, a given. In short, I'm judging the games based on the context of when they were released. So while by many measures BDSP are better than older Pokemon games, they are worse games overall.
Remember, this is actually an interaction that came up literally today in conversation, how I think False Spike Gaming has a video up on it, or someone does. Shinies in Gen 2 had really bad IVs. I don't remember how the system worked. I'd have to look back at it. But like that, there was an actual like interaction where if you got a shiny Pokemon, it would just be strictly like worse. Like, yeah, I think he's absolutely correct. And he's explaining something that should be common knowledge, and people should be able to intuit without really any external, like, right, interaction, any external force acting upon you. But I don't feel is really pitched as much. Yes, we have to compare the game as it is from the era, but also, yeah, like the game has clearly evolved over the year. We don't give brownie points for a game that just rehashes mechanics one for one, right? Like, sure, there's mechanics we all want to return, like Pokemon following you, which BDSP kind of did, right? Like there's mechanics like those that we kind of like seeing, quality of life things. Like, imagine if the next Pokemon game, right, just didn't have the physical special split. They went back to types being physical or special, right? That's going to be seen as a negative, right? That's going to be seen as a step backwards, right? And then you get the funny IGN Call of Duty reviews of the next Pokemon game after that being a step in the right direction, right? I think he's right for multiple points here, and I think this is a very fair argument to bring.
Because in many ways, they are worse than games that came before them, and that is not acceptable. BDSP's flaws fall into three main categories: highlighting issues with the original Diamond and Pearl, neglecting improvements from later games, especially Platinum, and creating new changes that either fall flat or cause outright harm. Let's start with the first section, highlighting issues with the original Sinnoh games.
Okay.
Diamond and Pearl added some great things to Pokemon. The main one is the physical special split, where moves are individually denoted physical or special instead of by type. This made it so some Pokemon who were completely unusable before were actually usable now. For example, Kingler, Sky High Attack, all water moves were special.
Flareon is kind of the weird exception here, because if I remember correctly, it didn't get Flare Blitz in Gen 4, at least early Gen 4. Sneasel as well also kind of suffered from the physical special split, because it had a high attack stat, but Dark and Ice, if I remember correctly, were special. I'd have to look up the chart again, because I don't actually have that specific chart memorized, because it's irrelevant going Gen 4 forward. But yeah, like I was gonna bring this up in his one of his prior videos, but I totally spaced it. Yeah, like there are Pokemon that greatly benefited from the physical special split. There are also Pokemon who greatly detrimented from the physical special split. I'm trying to think of one offhand. I can't, and for sake of time, we're going to continue.
Now it could use physical Crabhammer. Diamond and Pearl were also the first games to connect over Wi-Fi, and they had an extensive post-game area, which the previous region, Hoenn, totally lacked. Being a new generation, they added a bunch of new Pokemon, many of which were evolutions of older Pokemon that sorely needed them, which I really appreciate. Gliscor is my personal favorite of those, and still one of my overall favorite Pokemon to this day. Remember that. It's going to be important. But despite those additions, Diamond and Pearl did some...
I'm trying to remember. No, I know what he's talking about. It's been a while since I looked at BDSP metagame, because the metagame was actually very... As someone who is an aspiring VGC player who just never has the time to VGC, I remember very specifically that certain Pokemon were very odd because the format was so limited, and there was something else specifically with Gliscor. I can't wait to get to that section, but like... Yeah, BDSP's metagame was... It existed, I think.
Other weird and bad things, primarily related to the regional Sinnoh decks. Most of those new evolutions, like Mamoswine or Magmortar, are not in the regional decks. They're locked to the post-game. What?
That's... Okay, I can kind of forgive that, though. One, that could be a balancing thing. Two... That could be a, hey, we need, Mewtwo in the cave, right? Like, Gen 3, I know all of us, haha, go catch Rayquaza, funny, go fight Elite Four, here's my funny green Sky Noodle, right? But, like, in Gen 1, remember, we also had to go into Cerulean Cave in the post-game. So, I guess the counter-argument to that, piggybacking off of MandJTV's argument here, is that because... we have grown over the years. So obviously Gen 2, right? Hoenn Lugia locked a post-game, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. GSC is not my strong suit, as I've only played through Crystal twice. Stream Inbound at some point. Let me know if you want a full stream of that. And then Gen 3, yeah, we were able to get Rayquaza before Skypillar, Dialga and Palkia in Gen 4. So I guess technically, yeah. I guess if I had to objectively and critically think about it, I think I would agree with him here. I had to, like, problem solve this. I had to break it down into chunks and look at the progression. You're applying Gen 1 and 2 logic to Gen 4 with Gen 3 as precedent. Therefore, I think I can agree with what he's coming from. Like, I had to think about it.
What? Why? Why make all these cool new Pokemon, but not let you use any of them until you've basically finished the game? But even overlooking that massive issue, the DP Dex only has 151 Pokemon, 150 if you exclude Mythical Manaphy. This ties it with Kanto for the smallest regional dex in all of Pokemon. Now, this could have been fine if it was balanced properly, but it isn't. This is a spreadsheet I made tracking the type distribution of the Diamond Pearl Dex, where dual type Pokemon will appear twice.
Sure.
There are 73 total fully evolved Pokemon, and 17 of those are water type, meaning over 23% of the Dex possesses a type that you may not even want because you picked Piplup.
So I do think that this is a base criticism with Gen 4 as a whole, because Gen 4 notoriously does not have fire types. We have what, like Ponyta, Magmarline? There's a reason Infernape is popular, not just because of its stat block and its typing, right? When, firefighting wasn't, daring today, aren't we? Right? When it wasn't quite that status. But, I mean, it is also, it's a hard one to justify, right? It's like, I don't know. It kind of falls in the same, like, Oraz, Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, too much water, right? Like, you're in a tropical region. I do think that if I have to think about it, it is a little strange that with the generation prior having a lot of water types, that we run into a deficit of fire types with a favoritism on water types. But then again, my counterpoint to that is the literal post game is an island, right? Like there's clearly water areas, emphasis on island, right? As well as when you play into a Pokemon game, you will never have a completely, how do I word it? You will never have a perfect distribution. Like Gen 1, Psychic just wins. In Kanto, Psychic just wins. You go play Fire Red and Leaf Green and have like an Alakazam or Starmie. Play the whole game through with that. You're going to trivialize so much of the game with just doing that, right? So I think we should be also critical of that. But once again, that is Gen 1. This is Gen 4. There is clearly time, precedent, etc. I view it more as this is a region. This is the Sinnoh region. And there just so happens to be an abundance of water types here, especially nearing the post-game island, right? But should there be such a glaring deficit of fire types? I think that that's also where we start getting to the modern design philosophy of Pokemon, the whole Dexit fiasco, right? Where you can't have all 1,000 some odd Pokemon in a single game. You can transfer most of them to home, right? But you cannot have all of them in a single game. I had to wait till Scarlet and Violet for Alolan Muck to come back. Well, no, sorry, that's a lie. Let's go Pikachu and Eevee, right? That was an experience, right? But I couldn't bring Alolan Muck to Sword and Shield, right? I'm tangenting way too long on this one. Point being, I think that this is one there's some reasonable back and forth and wiggle room.
Meanwhile, Electric's only fully evolved Pokemon are Luxray, Raichu, and Pachirisu. Ice only has Weavile and Abomasnow. Fire, infamously, only has Rapidash and Infernape. And what's even more insane about these underrepresented types is that there are major trainers in the game that specialize in them. Candace, the Ice Gym leader, has to use a Metacham because they didn't want her to repeat more than one line.
Right.
Volkner's team is only half electric since he wouldn't even use Pachirisu. And then there's Flint, an Elite Four member they decided should specialize in a type that only has 2 fully evolved Pokemon. Now, he's not the only Elite Four member to have this problem. Agatha and Lance are specialists in types that only had 1 evolutionary line in their region.
That is a Gen 1-ism. That is a product of Gen 1 having limited typings for Dragon, which we know Dragon down the line, especially after Gen 5, Dragon became a very big issue, a glaring issue, to the point we had to have the Fairy type introduced, which has an immunity to Dragon, right? Gen 4 had Garchomp, right? Gen 5 had Hydreigon, full power Hydreigon, Dark Dragon, right? Gen 1 as well also had a very weird ism with ghost types, where RBY, right? Actual Gen 1, ghost type, due to a bug, didn't affect Psychic type. Ghost types were weird in Gen 1, but we did get more Ghosts down the line, and I'd argue Ghost is one of the strongest types in the game currently, with notable entries like Dragapult, Aegislash, who's had to be nerfed like, twice now at this point, since its debut generation in X and Y. Yeah, Ghost is very strong now.
But again, original games, I cut more slack, and also they sort of remedied it by having them repeat Pokemon. But Flint does not repeat Rapidash or Infernape, resulting in him being the only supposed type specialist where less than half of his team actually fits his type.
Yeah, you notice that like with Steelix, they give him like Fire Fang, Dripplum as Will-O-Wisp, Lopunny as Fire Punch, right? Like they try to cheese it in with knowing fire type moves.
And he's using the same fire types you've already seen your rival use a million times. Both the player and the NPCs are way too limited in their team options, and BDSP has those same issues. But they didn't have to. They could have fixed it because Platinum did. That leads...
This is I think this is going to be the big one. Like, and this has bugged me from day one. Why did we just not get, like, Pokemon Shining Platinum or whatever? Or Lustrous Platinum. Why did we not? Well, I guess Lustrous would be Ore and Pearl because Lustrous or Palkia, right? But like, why did we have to get the inferior version? But then again, Oraz was technically the inferior version of Emerald, was it not? We didn't get a Delta Emerald version, right? Even though we had, like, you know, going to the post-game island, the whole Battle Frontier coming soon thing up top, right? And we never got that. We kind of got teased it, but, like, it never actually panned out and did anything. It was kind of an Easter egg more than anything. Like, I guess we do have to compare that to Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, but I will, at this point, I will concede that my knowledge of Ruby and Sapphire in comparison to Emerald is very minuscule because I've only ever played Emerald through about twice. That's something I'll have to do on stream. I know I tried Pokemon Too Many Types a couple of times. I will go through that on stream at some point, but that's different. There are content differences between Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, and I am not an expert when it comes to Oraz and what it did and did not bring over from Emerald. So my argument on that understanding could be null and void if Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl was the exception there and didn't bring Platinum-isms over.
To the next section, ignoring previous improvements. Platinum version fixed Diamond and Pearl's bad regional dex problem, and it's the main reason why no one plays DP today, only Platinum. All of the cool new evolutions and the other members of their lines were added to the Sinnoh regional dex, alongside the lines of Scizor, Houndoom, Tropius, Altaria, Absol, and Rotom, which was originally locked to the post-game in Diamond and Pearl.
Yes, it was.
This vastly expands the decks for both the player and the NPCs. Candace, Volkner, and Flint now have teams composed entirely of their specialty type without repeating any Pokemon. But what is insane to me is that BDSP ignored this. They have the same Sinnoh dex as the original Diamond and Pearl, which was a terrible regional dex.
I wonder if Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl fails on the merit that it is a remake to a fault. Because you can have something that is a remake to a fault, right? Let's say you played a early PS2 game, right? And you love this game, for the era, this thing is great. But it gets a modern, like, port, remaster, right, remake, but it has the same glaring issues, right? Like a specific tiles just don't work or something like that, right? Or something in terms of attack is just like it's bugged, right? So you try to do a boosting move, but instead of being multiplicative, it just adds like 1 to your score, right? Like that is technically, sure, I guess, preserving the game, but it's kind of doing it to a fault. But I also posit, we also enter the other end of the spectrum where, as someone who, one of my literal favorite games of all time, top 3 is Majora's Mask, there are isms about the Majora's Mask remake that aren't faithful to the original and kind of spit in its face, right? Sure, Deku jumping, Zora swimming, we've all heard those, right? Like I would play each for a different reason. I would play the original Majora's Mask. Well, technically, I'd play the original Japanese Majora's Mask, which I got a copy of earlier this year, and I need to play through, because that has a completely different save system. Original N64 Majora's Mask, I would play that for a different reason than I would say the Grezzo Majora's Mask 3D remake, right? Like they do play differently. So you can have it both ways, though. It's a spectrum, right? You can be a good faithful remaster. You can be a bad faithful remaster. You can, change things to a degree where, sure, this makes sense for quality of life, and this makes sense for what you're doing. Even if this was the original intent behind the game, but it kind of invalidates or treads on the legacy of older entries, right? Now, and there's a specific section of Majora's Mask, Stone Tower's Temple, where if I remember correctly, I think there's the Triforce on the bottom of the 3 blocks leading into Stone Tower Temple, which is absent in the remake. In the remake, there's a shrine that is in same area. Stone Tower. Ikana is one of my favorite like locales like in gaming. I love Ikana Canyon. There's a down beneath. I think it's the waterfall. I think it's the 4 boss things. Then you go into the back, and then there's this little altar with like a mask, and it's, I guess, you know, people speculate this is where Majora's Mask was formed. But in the original, there's not really anything there. And that comes down to some controversy in regards to Grezzo maybe taking some artistic liberties that they maybe shouldn't have. I'm undereducated on that personally. Point being is that you should be taking the old and learning from it, and you should be willing to improve things that need to be improved, and also leave things alone that need to be left alone. And it is a balancing act, because we as gamers, let's be real, we're critical of really anything.
What? Why? Other remakes have kept the same regional decks as their original versions, specifically Fire Red Leaf Green, Heart Gold Soul Silver, and Let's Go. But they had no other versions of those regional dexes to reference. The Platinum Sinnoh Dex was right there! It's a Gen 4 Sinnoh Dex! Now, to be fair, BDSP are not as bad as Diamond and Pearl in this specific regard because of a new feature they added that I actually do like, the underground hideaways. In the Gen 4 Sinnoh games, no wild Pokemon could be obtained in the underground.
This was a feature that definitely depreciated. I remember doing this with a old friend I had, AJ. Him and I did this at sleepovers. Like we did this, but you know, I never did it in a mass capacity like you could, right? And this was definitely one of those that, as you know, game carts die, as people move on from Pokemon, like this was very much a minigame-ism for the era, and I'm glad that they made the underground system, because that has a lot more longevity than something like this. Is very much party game status, and I love it, but unless you have multiple friends who still to this day do it, I'm the odd one around. I still carry my 3DS around with Heart Gold in it, right? Or whatever game I happen to be playing at the time. Like, this is something that depreciates into obscurity over a long period of time.
But BDSP allowed you to find overworld Pokemon in habitat-specific hideaways added to the underground map.
And
the pool of Pokemon expands the more badges you get, eventually allowing you to find a ton of Pokemon once you have the national dex. But the way they did this was not good enough. First off, while the player can use these underground Pokemon, the NPCs do not. So Candace, Volkner, and Flint are back to their awful, half-baked teams. Then, while many of the Platinum Dex lines can be obtained underground, several are still locked to the post-game, like in Diamond and Pearl. Eevee fans and Glaceon fans especially get really burned by this.
Yeah, because I think, because the rocks. I don't know, maybe I'm the weird one. Like, I guess I've lived so long with stuff being locked to the post-game, like hunting Groudon, Kyogre, and Emerald, right? Or Mewtwo. Maybe I'm just kind of numb to it at this point, where it's like, yeah, certain things should be, you know, in the post game. But I guess that's a game-ism, right? Where, like, you know, you have to beat the game, or you have to do certain challenge, like Final Fantasy VII. Did you do your Chocobo breeding quest so you can get to the funny island in the northeast of the map and get Knights of the Round, so you can 12x Knights of the Round Sephiroth? Like when games reward you for going the extra mile, especially for completion bonuses, like, I love that. That is a classic game-ism. So, I don't know, maybe I'm just numb to it. I'm personally not super bothered by stuff being locked to the post-game. In most situations, there are the odd situations, like, you know, we covered in Fire and Leaf Green, where, like, something will attempt to evolve, but it can never actually evolve, because you don't have the national dex, because it's trying to be faithful to Red, Blue, and Green to a fault, right? Like, that one I take a little more issue with.
Eevee is post-game only, like it was in Diamond and Pearl, not early game like in Platinum. Then, even once you get one, you can't get Sylveon at all, because BDSP are wholly incompatible with any Pokemon Gen 5 and later. This includes regional forms, which were never going to be obtainable in the game locally, but you can't even transfer them in. Even Let's Go lets you get those. Oh my god, and Glaceon especially, like, oh my god. Sword and Shield changed its evolution method from leveling up near the Icy Rock to just using an Ice Stone. But
I do appreciate this. Just make Sunstone, Moonstone work, please. Like Pokemon, just make it work. It makes it way more efficient. It's going to be a lot more useful for newer players. It's going to be a lot more new player friendly. I think that at that point, the Happiness evolutions might have might be a barrier to entry. Like, this is one of those things where it's like, I say this because, like, oh, don't get me wrong, we had to do some stuff back in the day for some evolutions, right? We still kind of have to in certain regards, right? Like, getting, what do you call it? Basque Legion, right? Or, like, Overquill or, like, Annihilate. Like, we still have to do certain things for dex entries, right? But, like, I feel like this is a product of its time and that you could honestly shortcut this, especially because in XD Gale of Darkness, we literally have Sunshard, Moonshard to just get Umbreon and Espeon. I don't know. Like, still keep friendship for things like, you know, Return and Frustration, right? But, like, having it as a requirement for things, I feel, at this point, just bogs down progress and might actually spook new players off. That's I would argue that's a controversial take. That's what I'm open to like, debate on.
BDSP ripped that away and kicked Eevee to the post-game, making yet another game where you cannot practically play through with a Glaceon. Glaceon was added to the game almost 20 years ago, and you couldn't practically play through with one until Sword and Shield.
That's wild.
They hate Glaceon for some reason.
Fair enough.
It is I, Go Runty Boy, and let me get right to it. Raycon is the sponsor of today's video, and you love their earbuds, right?
Yeah, I literally use them every day when I'm at the gym.
You work out?
Yeah.
Huh.
What was that? What are you trying to...
Well, I'm here to show you the latest model of the Raycon Everyday Earbuds.
Ooh, these look great. Wow, and they're really comfortable too. I want to go back to earlier though. Like, what was that? What were you saying?
The Everyday Earbuds now feature a 32-hour battery life, multi-point connectivity so you can connect to 2 devices at once, and active noise cancellation, a must-have for flights. There's also a new quick charge function, 10 minutes of charging for 90 minutes of battery. You can also get a protective case cover. Look at mine. Stylish, right?
Absolutely.
Those look good.
Great time to get them too, thanks to Black Friday.
Yes, indeed. Go to buyraycon.com/MandJTV or click the link below to get up to 30% off site-wide as part of the Black Friday sale.
I will definitely be grabbing some as gifts. Great sound quality at an extra great price. But I do need to circle back to what you said earlier. Are you implying that I look like I don't work out? I'll have you know, I am in excellent shape.
Oh, sorry, I cannot hear you right now, and I have to go. Ta-ta!
But going back to the...
Honestly, I'd give that a 10. Audio is consistent. I mean, obviously his voice is cracking when he does the high notes, right? But that's like fine, right? Like, he's having fun with the ad read. I can kind of hear bits of the script in there, but I mean, it's not flat, right? It's not like today's sponsor is X and today we will. It's not flat like that, right? Like, he's having fun with it. It's enjoyable. It's additive. The transition sure isn't technically there because it's a jump cut right to the ad, but it's one of those that, like, it's its own section of the video and it feels additive to the experience. I'd give it a 10.
Underground Pokemon, Pinsir, Smoochum, and Teddy Ursa were randomly added. Sure, but what they did that is so enraging that my vision blurs every time I think about it is that they made some Pokemon available, but don't let you evolve them. You can get Duskull, Rhyhorn, and crucially, Gligar down in the underground, but the Reaper Cloth, Protector, and Razorfang are locked to their Diamond and Pearl post-game locations. This is irredeemably unacceptable. Fire Red Leaf Green and Heart Gold Soul Silver also locked later gen evolutions to the post-game, such as Crobat is only post-game in Fire Red Leaf Green, and Honchkrow's only post-game in Heart Gold Soul Silver. To be clear, I've never been okay with this in any Pokemon game. They're remakes, not remasters. Like, you bring other improvements from the original versions, like the battle system changes and stuff like that. The new evolutions, those are improvements. Bring those over too. Let the Pokemon fully evolve during the playthrough.
I think I mostly agree with what he's saying. Like, I get where he's coming from, and I totally acknowledge his point. Like, he has a good point. I think the concern from a game design standpoint is that certain improvements, like allowing, say, Crobat or Honchkrow or Gliscor in an early game setting might trivialize the game. But to be fair, as a valid counterpoint, is that not taking power away from the player and limiting player choice and freedom? I think that brings a good point there. And I think that, by extension, is also why randomizers are so popular.
Mega Ruby Alpha Sapphire did this right, adding later gen evolutions to the regional decks. For example, Ruby Sapphire only had Roselia, but you can play through Oris with a Rose Raid.
Fair,
Let's Go
okay.
reverted back to just the original 151, but they did it so completely, like Crobat does not exist in Let's Go at all. I do not like that. I want to be very clear. I wish Let's Go had Kingdra and Crobat and Steelix, etc.
Would have been cool.
But I still think BDSP is worse for two reasons. And the first is inconsistency. Why did they let you get Mamoswine and Gallade, but not Rhyperior? Why did they let you get Electivire and Magmortar, which do require the annoyance of getting their Evo items off wild Pokemon, but they don't let you get a Reaper Cloth or Razorfang on some other wild Pokemon?
This tells me it's a balancing thing specifically.
As for the second reason, the non-Oris remakes at least could be like, oh hey, we just did exactly what the original games did. Sure, I guess. I don't like it, but like, they would have to decide where the dragon scale would go in Kanto. I think it's stupid, but at least that argument can be made. But BDSP had Platinum as a reference. They had a Gen 4 Sinnoh game that had Rhyperior, Dusknoir, and Gliscor in it, and they could have just put the evolution items in the spots they were in Platinum. No.
Or hear me out, you just have it at a vendor for BP or something, right? Like you have a vendor, like just make an NPC, just like, you just Mystic NPC, trade red shards or green shards for it, right? Grats, you're done.
Decision necessary, just copy the Gen 4 game. That's what you were doing already! When I first played through Brilliant Diamond, I was so excited to use Gliscor, since I could finally have a flying type that did not need to be able to learn fly. And then after I caught Gligar, I found out the Razorfang was near the Battle Tower, its location from Diamond and Pearl. They put the Razorfang after the lead! In a defiant rage, I had a friend trade me a Razorfang, meaning I could only use Gliscor because I knew someone who had already finished the game. BDSP handled the DP versus Platinum deck situation in the worst way possible. Inconsistency, compartmentalization, getting people's hopes up only to dash them.
So I do agree with him here, actually. I think he brings good points to the table. I would posit that, it's been a word I've been using a lot recently, posit. I would bring to the table that him knowing somebody with a Razorfang to trade it in so he can get Gliscor, that is very much old Pokemon. You know a person who knows a thing. Hey, where'd you catch that Mewtwo? You know, I've never seen that Pokemon before. Or is Mew really under the truck? And then your buddy's like, no, you can't get back there. Even if you glitch back there, like there's nothing back there, right? A number of things, right? Like, or Peekaboo, right? Playground rumors of Peekaboo, right? Like it was very much word of mouth, a community. You know, who do you know? What do they know? This was very much before the advent of the internet. We also have the internet now. Like, I think it's hard because a lot of the people who did play, you know, like I did, right? Like I've been playing Pokemon easily since I don't want to feel old. But I mean, I started, as I said, in Pokemon Fire Red, went back to Crystal, and, you know, eventually went back and played Yellow, right? Like, I've played Pokemon for effectively the entirety of Pokemon's lifespan, for all intents and purposes, whether that be, you know, collecting trading cards or, like, which I still actually, like, I have Dragon Ball EX literally built. I just never go to events right now. Or playing games, right? Like, I think that we have to, when we consider things in the era, like he was literally saying earlier, like, sure, things did make sense. But people like me, like you, like many others, right, have jobs, have families, have things you have to do. So you might not be able to spend the time to play Pokemon all day, especially when competitive Pokemon itself is, for all intents and purposes, a full-time job. I think I'm a Blissey has like a video on it where, like, yeah, playing competitive Pokemon is effectively a full-time job, and I can corroborate that in certain aspects. Yeah, definitely. So I think that I really feel there was the flip-flop here. Like, I think he brings up a good point in them feeling like they accept and adhere to certain things, but they just reject and deny other things. And it's inconsistent. I think he brings up a valid point here.
On its own is inexcusable for me, but I'm not even done. There are several more improvements that BDSP ignored. Sword and Shield made the move reminder free and in every Pokemon Center. BDSP put him back in Pastoria City. And while after 10 heart scale uses he becomes free forever, this is still a downgrade from free everywhere all the time. TMs break again. Sword and Shield made it so some TMs never broke and some TRs needed purchasing. But
I think the TMTR system from Sword and Shield was the best we had. Like, I know people hated it, and they actually much prefer the crafting one from Scarlet and Violet. I don't like Scarlet and Violet's. I personally did like how Sword and Shield did it. I think it was the optimal for competitive.
this was a regression in my opinion.
Yes.
And BDSP made it worse. All TMs break, and you can only get more from randomized sellers in the underground that you have to track down and hope they're selling what you want. I wanted to teach Thunderwave to my Gallade to use for catching Pokemon, and I've never gotten the Thunderwave TM because my only options for getting it are tracking down a random dude in the underground or purchasing it with battle points at the battle tower? You want me to spend battle points on a single-use TM for Thunderwave?
I mean, to be fair, that is very much an old Pokemon-ism, right? Remember in Heart Gold, Soul Silver, same generation, right? We had to get single-use TMs that were only in the game corner from the game corner using game corner funny money. Remember that? That was a thing.
Oh, and speaking of the Battle Tower, Platinum improved the Battle Tower into the Sinnoh Battle Frontier, which was ported over to Heart Gold Soul Silver as well. Apparently, Pokemon is extremely against ever doing a Battle Frontier again.
I don't know why, bro. Like, please. Like, just bring it back.
Because in BDSP, it's just the Battle Tower now. Both Oris and BDSP failed to bring back their Battle Frontiers, and I think that stinks. I'm a smart adult now. Let me give them a shot. Then this next one is weird because technically they did bring in a good thing from previous games, but they did it so badly that I wish they had not brought it in at all. BDSP did following Pokemon the worst way in the entire series, despite having clear inspiration to take from previous games. You know what? Let's look at all of the previous game following Pokemon and their good and bad. Yellow had just the Pikachu follow you, and it functions similarly to Heart Gold Soul Silver, the gold standard, no pun intended, for following Pokemon.
Yeah, Heart Gold Soul Silver is kind of the gold standard. Like, actually, though.
For every Pokemon in the game, Heart Gold Soul Silver puts a sprite behind your character that generally matches the size of the Pokemon, and it moves exactly at player speed. It looks great and feels great, and I genuinely have no criticisms. Let's Go nails it for a 3D world. The Pokemon are to scale, they show off unique movements like rolling sand,
Yeah, Gengar is way larger than I expect him to be.
Slash, and some of them let you ride them in interesting, unique, or even beneficial ways, like Arcanine moving faster. Sword and Shield does it quite badly. Not only is it limited to the DLC areas, but the Pokemon move stupidly. Some are simply too slow to ever keep up with you. Some are too slow when walking, too fast when sprinting, so they fall behind, sprint.
You know, actually, he brings up a good point. I hadn't thought about that. I was trying to figure out why it didn't quite make sense. And then him literally bringing out, which is after, right, the split, right? After the generational split between 7 and 8, Sun and Moon, Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, and Let's Go. Why does Let's Go, the gold standard for modern 3D Pokemon following you and riding? This is a really weird one for me to think about now. Yeah, like yeah, actually, yeah, because I have, in the DLC areas, noticed these exact things in Sword and Shield.
Fall behind, sprint, it's like you have a yo-yo behind you. Only specific fast enough Pokemon actually follow you well,
I do love Corviknight,
but at least most Pokemon are to scale. BDSP took all the bad parts of Sword and Shield following, tried to put it in a Heart Gold Soul Silver style, and just ignored everything good about Let's Go. First, the Pokemon are not to scale, so bigger Pokemon look terrible.
Yeah.
Look at Onix in BDSP versus Let's Go. It's night and day. Now, unlike other Switch games, BDSP has a different model for the overworld player versus the in-battle player. So it makes sense that they had to shrink things down. But in Heart Gold Soul Silver, where that's the case as well, they replaced the in-battle sprites with simplified Chibi-esque sprites for following. BDSP did not do that. They just copied over the in-battle models, which looks incredibly stupid.
Okay, in all fairness, though, a 3D model is going to have a lot more going on with it, and on average will have a lot more space it takes up than a sprite sheet, if we're going to be fair and objective about it.
Especially for big Pokemon like Dialga, or for Pokemon who pose in battle differently than they would move. Look at Ekans following you in Let's Go. It's nice, right?
He's so cool.
A slithering snake. Now look at it in BDSP. It
I hate that. Oh, I genuinely hate that.
Epitomizes trashy laziness. Additionally, they took all of Sword and Shield's movement problems and put them into BDSP. Some Pokemon are too slow, then have to sprint. Some are just too slow and can never keep up. It's annoying to have anything follow you, so I never did any of it. If they were...
I wonder if this is done on purpose to show somebody in a board meeting, look, hey, we added Pokemon following, therefore this game, so we added Pokemon following, this game didn't do well, therefore people clearly don't want it, right? Like we see this in the AAA games industry all the time, right? Where like, hey, they release something and it doesn't do well, and they're like, well, we're never doing that again. And it's like, what do you mean? Like, fix like one or two things about it. Like, really? I feel like this is like tinfoil hat territory, right? But this is definitely something that I feel, especially with how modern Pokemon and Nintendo as a whole operate, right? Two separate entities, but like how they operate. I feel this could be something that, like, yes, dear shareholders, board of investors, yes, this game that we did, yeah, we know that it underperformed. However, we will redouble our efforts and make sure that, you know, this doesn't happen again. And then they don't have to work on Pokemon following as a mechanic. Like, it's so strange. Like, that's tinfoil hat territory. Like, take that with a huge, massive shaker of salt. At minimum, I think I'm just upset because Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee just has a better Pokemon follow and ride system. That's wild to me.
Gonna do following Pokemon right, they needed chibi Pokemon models, maybe similar to the ones from Pokemon Rumble, and those models should have followed the player at the speed of the player, no matter how fast the Pokemon actually is. I do not care about realism in Overworld Sinnoh. I'm playing as a character whose head is 3 times the size of their body, and all the buildings face the same direction. Make the Pokemon cute and small and move at my speed. Now, of course, I'm aware making all of those chibi models would have been a lot of extra work, especially for like 400 or whatever Pokemon. So if on a time crunch, which, let's be real, they definitely were, they simply
BDSP more and more feels like it was just a time crunch to get out for specific sales metrics.
They should not have had the feature at all. They only had it in Amity Square in the originals. So just make cute separate overworld models for the Pokemon that can go there and don't let following happen anywhere else. Instead, they tossed this in seemingly as an afterthought and marketed it as a fancy new feature that's just a worse version of something that already existed in previous games. And now for the final category of problems, new things that suck. I know I said something else earlier, but that's basically what it is. You could summarize this as, oh, you kept the DP Sinnoh Dex to be faithful? Then why'd you do this? First is how the game looks. This is quite subjective, but I don't personally like it. Although it may not be for the reasons that you think. The chibi art style was heavily criticized, but that doesn't actually really bother me that much. I think they could have gone for something more like an Oris, but I understand preserving the shrunken person style for this type of world map. What I really don't like is how the battles and the characters look. Many Pokemon are not to scale, which they were in Let's Go. None of the characters got cool redesigns like they did in Oris. And also, I think they just look bad. Every time I go to a Sinnoh Gym Leader's Bulbapedia page, I get jump scared by their BDSP art. The renders look emotionless and like they're made of weird clay. No other 3D Pokemon game has made me feel like this. I don't know why. I'm not an artist or a game developer, so I don't know if it's the shading or the models or the expressions, but like, I just don't like how any of the people look.
I think it's, if I had to give a guess at it, I think it has to do with how the engine, it'd probably be engine lighting, right? I think the models are like fine. Like I look at what's her face, Candace. Candace's model looks fine to me, but I think it has to do with the lighting. And I know there's some people allegedly over on funny not Bird app anymore, right? Who I guess have like hyper modded BDSP, and they've added like a lot, like Armored Mewtwo, Shadow Lugia, a lot of quality of life stuffs. Like The thing that upsets me about BDSP is like I think the bones are great. I think there really is something there, but this really just didn't have enough time to cook. And the fact that like modders are able to just go above and beyond and really fix the game just speaks volumes about how this game could have been something just great. But it was just held back and just, delivered in the state that it was. We didn't even have the Coliseum in the basement when I was playing. I was going to go boot up BDSP before this, but I totally forgot. See if going into the basement of the Pokemon Center, you had the Coliseum active or not, because that just, it said coming soon when I was playing it.
All of their eyes look dead. Another bad change they made was just how you move around the world. In almost every game before Sun and Moon, the character is locked to a grid, the original Sinnoh games included. This is perfectly fine, because the worlds around the character are
I know what he's talking about. He's talking about the diagonal movement and how it breaks the game.
designed with sets of tiles. But then the game's advanced, and in Alola and Galar, the player has more freedom of movement. The developers of BDSP carried that freedom of movement over to Sinnoh. The character is not locked to a grid, so if you inch over a little at a time, your character will only move an inch at a time, not one square over per press of the button. This was a huge mistake. Moving around with the joystick is fine if it's a wide open area, but in crowded places with thin walkways like Mount Coronet, I can't get around a single corner without getting caught on it.
I will say, if I remember correctly, you can use the D-pad for directional movement. It is technically possible. At least the player is given the choice.
But then moving around with the directional buttons instead still doesn't solve your issue completely. Not only are you still not confined to the grid, but you now have to hold the run button the whole time, which you don't while using the joystick. Additionally, the Joy-Con has 4 distinct buttons, as opposed to a 1-button D-pad where you can change directional inputs just by tilting your finger. This causes problems because when I want to change directions, my thumb leaves a button, then hits another, causing a momentary stoppage in input, so most of the time my character pauses for a moment before turning.
I guess you could probably fix that by just like rolling your thumb a little differently. But no, he is correct, especially on the old fat DSs. I mean, this goes back to like Game Boy Advanced, right? With how spongy the D-pad felt. Oh, I loved how spongy the thing felt. Like, yeah, like it was all a solid, a solid button with directional inputs on it. He brings up a good point.
Maybe it's better on a Pro Controller, but I've had way too many Pro Controller D-pad problems to tolerate that. And what's frustrating about this is that there's 2 ways they could have done it better that earlier games did. The first is in Oris. Moving with the circle pad does not lock the character to a grid, but if you want to swap to the D-pad, it instantly puts you back on the grid. Plus, the 3DS has a traditional D-pad. So changing directions is smooth and instant. Let's Go never has the character on a grid, but they redesigned the world to account for that. For example, Kanto's Route 13 is the one with that random labyrinth of fences.
Yeah, the fences.
Who built these? And why?
Civil engineers.
Did their herd of cows turn into minotaurs? But anyways, in the 2D games, the paths between fences are only 1 tile wide. But then in Let's Go, they're wide enough for the player to run in a circle between them. If there's no grid, you need wider spaces, and Let's Go nailed that.
Well, and it's like literally looking at this, right? Like they clearly have people who understand game design, right? I hadn't thought of this. Like, I love talking about game design. I hadn't thought of this. This makes complete sense. You have to scale up the world to accommodate. So yeah, and say fire, red, leaf, green, or like red, blue, yellow. Yeah, you might be able to move right, hit fence, move up, left, down, right, up, and then, then left again to be back in center, right? So you can technically move in a circle in the fence, because it looks like there's just enough room to make it happen if I go back to the fire red footage, right? But it's like, so scaling that up, right? You keep the core design of the area by scaling it up so you can still run in a circle. You're scaling it up to work with the current movement system. That's brilliant. That just got flubbed in BDSP. That is wild to me.
BDSP should have allowed us to get on a grid for tight spaces, or redesigned the world so that there weren't as tight of spaces. And they did neither, so moving around the world sucks. And the final thing they changed that I'll be discussing, which I take huge issue with, is also the thing I expect to get the most pushback on.
Okay, I'm ready.
Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl have an absolutely terrible difficulty problem.
Okay.
As you progress through the game, you have a universal experience share, something not present in the Gen 4 games. This is a problem because they did not adjust the major trainer battle levels to compensate for this.
I would say the player should be given the choice, as we had, I think, on Gen 6, right? You could EXP all, you could just turn it, because we had EXP all in Gen 1, right? Which, like, you know, it gave like everyone in your party like 6 EXP, right? Like it actually was a true EXP all. Then we went to EXP share, and now we went back to EXP all again, starting like X and Y. But in X and Y or you could turn it off. Just allow the player to turn it off. Or even if you're doing like the battle system, the Pokemon I Choose You, and you knock things in the overworld out in Scarlet and Violet, something like that. Sure, then yeah, have everyone gain experience. Yeah, I guess. But it's like, allow the player the ability to turn on or off the EXP all to just accommodate their run. I think this actually belies a greater problem of Pokemon says this is how you will play our game, even if how you play the game isn't fun or has problems. You will play the game with 23% of your decks being water and, like, you know, 2 fire-type Pokemon in your game. Okay? That kind of sucks. But I guess also this was of the era where you could... I think it was in the post-game, wasn't it? So you can't... No, that doesn't even fix it. Moving up from Gen 3 to 4. But I think that was post-game. So that doesn't even fix the fire-type problem. Yeah. Like, I think there's a number of commentaries we could draw from this.
By the time I fought Volkner, my entire team was level 52 or 53.
Disgusting.
While his highest was 49. Now, they did try to compensate for this, but it didn't really work. As time goes on, the gym leaders start to use better items. Byron uses a soft sand and citrus berry, but then Candace's Snover has an icy rock to extend the hail, and Sneasel has a chopal berry. Volkner's Raichu has a shuka berry. Additionally, later gym leader Pokemon start to have EVs, which trainer Pokemon did not have at all in the originals. However, despite that, I beat basically all the gym battles handily, even playing on set style. For the most part, the game was really easy. And that's not just because I'm an adult now. I have lost to Platinum Candace as an adult.
I've lost things that I really don't want to admit to. Like my Leon battle in Sword and Shield was just me tennis ball launchering revives the entire time. I won by a battle of attrition, I think with Weather and Toxic.
Now, most of my team was weak to ice, and she has a Frostlass with Snow Cloak and Double Team, which is a really nasty set, I'll be real. But BDSP didn't have that. But essentially,
I got overconfident in my recent Emerald run and lost to Winona. I lost to Altaria, just Dragon Dancing 3X, right? Cool. My mistake. I let the bird absolutely set up and sweep.
result of the universal experience share was like, okay, the game was really easy, but now I should not have to grind before I fight the Elite Four. And the slog of grinding before that, it's always been my least favorite part of Pokemon.
Yeah.
So I entered my first fight with the League with my team at or almost at level 60, and Cynthia's highest level is 66. It felt like a nice middle ground level because I wanted to do it on set battle style and without using any potions. The game had been so easy up to that point, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna give myself this challenge. And then I learned they made the League ridiculous. All the Elite Four have intelligent EV spreads. They're not maxed out, but having smart EV spreads when the original games had no EVs at all is
Doesn't Garchomp have like 6 IVs in everything?
crazy.
Or, sorry, 31 IVs in all 6 stats?
They also have excellent natures, mostly jolly and adamant for physical attackers or timid and modest for special attack.
Congrats, that's how you play competitive Pokemon. Are you adamant, jolly, timid, or modest? No? Okay, what's your actual use case on the team? Well, I'm just a physical attacker. Okay, do you use your special attack? No? Okay, why are you not playing adamant? What are you trying to defend against? Why would you ever have a let's see. So if we're gonna go like plus attack minus special defense, right? Why would you ever have a careful Garchomp? What are you trying to defend against? If you're getting hit by the Ice Beam, I mean, have you considered Yachi Berry? like, we have a type chart, don't get me wrong. It exists. In competitive Pokemon, Are you adamant, jolly, timid, or modest? No. What is your specific use case, and what are you trying to do? If you can't answer that, just be adamant, jolly, timid, or modest.
Their IVs are almost all perfect, including 3 of Lucian's Pokemon having 0 speed IVs, because he uses Trick Room. 0 speed IVs for Trick Room.
Hilarious.
That is a competitive Pokemon player strategy.
Yep.
And that's not the only one they use. Flame Orb Guts Heracross.
Disgusting.
Rest Chestoberry Hippowdon. Life Orb on Sheer Force Steelix and Magic Guard Alakazam. Oh, and did you notice anything about some of the Pokemon I just mentioned? If you didn't, well, some of them have their hidden abilities. And then you get to Cynthia. And it gets truly disgusting.
Okay, I'm glad I'm not the only one who struggled on Cynthia.
All of her Pokemon have perfect IVs in all but one stat. And that stat is usually the offensive stat they're not using.
Yeah, that's it. That's the competitive mindset, right? Like, and especially if you're a special attacker, you generally want like 0 IVs in your attacking stat, because technically you worry about confusion at that point, and confusion scales off your physical attacking stat. So if you have a Gardevoir and you have 6 IVs, that is technically worse, than a 5 IV Gardevoir with 0 IVs in physical attack. Competitive Pokemon is a very strange place.
They have maxed out EV spreads. Their strategies are ridiculous. Leftovers Gastrodon, Flame Orb Marvel Scale Milotic. Her Garchomp, which was already infamously hard in the old games, now has Rough Skin, holds a Yachi Berry, and knows Swords Dance. She has a fully competitive team that probably outlevels your random EV, random nature Pokemon, and she's using full restores.
I'm going to be honest, I kind of want more Elite Fours like this, though. I feel like they should absolutely be a challenge.
I played on set, but despite my extensive Pokemon experience, I still lost to her on my first try.
Yeah.
I even came back, having EV trained my Weavile, and still did not outspeed the Garchomp.
Wild.
And then I only won because of affection, a stupid crapshoot mechanic that allowed me to live or dodge attacks I normally would not. Now,
Oh my god. Oh, I have very strong opinions on Attract as a move and condition.
I know what some of you are thinking. This is really cool. I have thought Pokemon was too easy for far too long, so it's nice to have a serious challenge. I enjoy the process of losing over and over and over again until I eventually overcome that obstacle. I mean, of course some of you would think that. That's why difficult games are played. Now, if you think that way, that's just a personal preference difference between the two of us that we got to establish. I personally avoid difficult games like the plague because when playing games, I tend to prefer my kicking ass to getting my ass kicked ratio to be high. What does
Honestly, though, respect. I feel like he's gonna get flack for this, and like I feel like I feel like I'm coming across as some big like MLG gamer. I'm really not. Look at any of my TF2 streams. We raged at Engineer when I last stream. Like I'm awful at Engineer. But even then, like going outside of that, right? Like sure, I have a lot of good theoretical knowledge in games like Pokemon. I've probably played under 50 VGC matches in my entire life, probably under 25, right? But I have good theoretical knowledge. I have a decent understanding. Silent Hill 4, a game that I've never played a Silent Hill game until Silent Hill 4 on stream, and I loved it. I thought it was great. I played it on easy because I knew what the mechanic was going to be with what's her face. How half the back half of the game is a literal escort mission with consequences if she takes too much damage in the final fight, to a point that it could technically make it impossible, and it also locks you out of an ending, right? Like, if you want to play a game on easy, just play a game on easy. If you want to just go through a game, that's fine. Like, you're totally entitled to do that. Now, there are games, right, as someone who's top 10% Destiny 2 Raiders, and I still have a long way to go before I quite literally feel any way, shape, or form an authority in certain encounters and stuff, right? Like, I've ran Planets and Root of Nightmares Do. I talk about it consistently. Like, I want the challenge in a lot of aspects, but I don't necessarily want the challenge in everything, and I do have a limit, right? Dead Space 2 Hardcore 3 save was one of the most frustrating things I have ever done, especially the laser room with the marker. I hate the laser room with the marker because the boxes are kill boxes. Oh, I did not like that run. Dead Space Remake, right? I had to cheese and sleaze my way through that on the hardest difficulty, even though you could technically infinitely save in a single save file, because I couldn't do the difficulty. If there's anything you take from this, there's nothing wrong with wanting to play a game on easy. There's nothing wrong with wanting a light, casual experience. And I would argue Pokemon does offer that. I think that from an objective standpoint, having an optional boss or like a secret quote-unquote Elite Four that's optional would be great for something like this, would be great for an actual competitive mindset. However, for a base game, your average person, as long as they've played the game, as long as they know their type matchups, as long as they're cognizant about what they're firing their moves into, right? There shouldn't really be any problem, right? So, and that's where the Pokemon community will definitely disagree. I like certain things competitive. I like certain things harder. But there are other things where I just want to sit down and have fun. And I think a lot of us have really lost that. I think a lot of gamers, especially with how omnipresent competitive mindsets are and competitive communities are, just go play something like TF2 and have fun with some silly hats in the Heavy's minigun. Go play a Pokemon game and, go play through just using your Eevee team, right? There's nothing wrong with that.
Despite that preference, I don't have a problem with Pokemon games including really difficult challenges. In this video, I've lamented the fact that we haven't had a Battle Frontier in 15 years.
It's optional.
My problem with the BDSP League, and the reason I think it's bad, is because of when it is. They're locking all the post-game content behind a challenge that the game has not properly prepared you for, since no battles before this have come close to being this tough.
This is the Pokemon Coliseum effect. It wasn't Gonzap. Gonzap was XD. The Team Snag'em leader, how you get to the Team Snag'em leader and he's a difficulty spike, and then you go up the funny elevator to the quote-unquote Elite Four of Coliseum, and that's another difficulty spike. And then the final boss is technically more of a difficulty spike. It's the Coliseum effect.
You breeze through most of the game with random EV, random IV, random nature Pokemon, and then you're expected to beat fully competitive Pokemon with your playthrough team? Pokemon competitive battling has always kind of been in defiance of the friendship/partner aspect of Pokemon, since to win, you generally need properly bred super soldiers trained perfectly for battle. But
they have done their best to fix this over the years with things like mints for natures, bottle caps for IVs. We still need a negative bottle cap for negative IVs to get, the zero IVs, because a Torkoal with one IV versus a Torkoal with 0 IVs will always lose in Trick Room. And there's not really an easy way to guarantee the 0 IVs. That needs to get fixed. Competitive Pokemon is a very strange world.
But if the random ones that you formed a bond with and just took on your journey without any specific training methods are what the game wants you to play with, then why does the Pokemon League have the super soldiers that'll spit on your Pokemon's graves? And even if you decide you want to make your own super soldiers, realistically, you can't. Some of the League Pokemon have hidden abilities. You can't get wild hidden ability Pokemon until you have the Pokeradar, which needs the National Dex, which is technically possible to get before you beat the League, but it's an insane time sink, no one's gonna do it. Many of the competitive items they use are only found in the Battle Park by spending BP. The power items for efficient EV training are also locked behind the National Dex. You can't even
I don't remember if you get the Macho Brace or not. I know the Macho Brace is early in Gen 3, Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald. I think Aura has too. I think it's just the Windstrain house.
Realistically breed for good IVs because the Destiny Knot is either found on Route 224, which requires you to beat the League, or you have to hope for a 1% chance to get it from pickup. So much of Pokemon's difficulty is affected by preparation and team building. But if you can't prepare in the same way that the League does, that is unfair. And that means your only methods of preparation are realistically hoping you get lucky with affection or frickin' grinding.
So here's what this is actually invocative of. So Silent Hill 2, Silent Hill 4, we were talking about this. So in a game like Silent Hill 4, where the room heals you for the first half of the game, but in the back half of the game, it no longer heals you and in fact gets haunted and is hostile towards you, that's very invocative of this because you spend your entire game playing one way, right? Just, hey, cool, whatever, I got my new partner Pokemon, I'm going to go battle through it. And then you hit an optimized Pokemon League. That tells you that you've been playing, you need to change how you play the game that late into the game. Why I think this works for something like Silent Hill 4 is because, sure, different genre, right? But like, so both of these have a crucial point where you do have to adjust how you play the game. In Silent Hill, the game doesn't really change so much as you just lose access to a couple features. In Pokemon, the reason this is different is, well, you have a physical attacker and all your EVs happen to be in special attack. That sucks. Your build is completely just unoptimal, right? Thus, you have to potentially, if you're trying to be optimal, you have to go back, probably catch another one, see if you get good IVs. Trying to go to EVs, which EVs aren't necessarily that hard, they're just time consuming, and then making sure you're doing the exact same grind to get back to, say, levels 60, 65 that you have with your previous Pokemon. That is an arbitrary time sink, is what that is. And it is artificial difficulty, in my opinion. It is forcing the player to play the game in a different way where it does not respect their time.
I don't mind the existence of a competitive Pokemon League.
Yeah.
If it's the rematch.
No, I was about to say, yeah, I agree with that. If it's the round 2, yeah, IVs, EVs all day.
Allows you to either build up a competitive team with all of the resources you now have access to, or train up against post-game level Pokemon with your playthrough team. But making it so defeating this unfair league is a requirement to unlock more content is just kind of cruel and extremely hostile to beginners.
Yeah.
This is very specific to me, but I think back to the emotional kid that I was when I played Diamond and Pearl for the first time in middle school, the worst years of my life.
Yeah.
And if kid me had to fight this version of Cynthia, he would have cried with rage and probably would have beaten it eventually with excessive potion usage or many, many hours spent grinding. But I feel like it would have left a really sour taste in my mouth from the experience. And very well may not have gone back to play the games again for a very long time.
We also have to remember Pokemon is, for all intents and purposes, marketed towards children. It's what I keep saying whenever the scalpers get brought. I saw a Twitter post today about, oh, I just bought this sealed collection. It was like an actual like moving cardboard box full of just sealed ETBs and boxes. Oh, got this for $3,700, and this is worth $5,600. Love you with the website of whoever sold it to them. And I'm like, or like you'll like watch the like Charlie Moist Critical. He does a really good job of cracking down on stuff like that because he'll watch the videos and he'll provide his thoughts on it. And he doesn't have a lot of good things to say about it, right? Like, Pokemon is a game marketed at children. It's why when I go to like an event or something like that, the understanding is, yeah, I'm playing Dragon Ball EX. I might have some person who's 12-year-old sitting next to me, and they're playing 60 card pile, right? Or is it 50? I think it's 50. I can't remember. I have to remember deck size. But like, and then it's just it's kept professional. And even in the TCG side of things, we're seeing kids actively be denied. I went to the whatever Enzorark. I think it wasn't Journey Together. I don't think it was Destiny Rivals. I don't remember what the set was. But I went to the pre-release and they had like 50 kits total at the store. And like kids actively got turned away because they were like 70 in line, right? Like, I'm noticing a trend in which adults seem to feel almost entitled. And I guess there is a certain amount of entitlement when you spent 20 plus years playing Pokemon, right? It's feeling entitled to Pokemon and the entirety of Pokemon's time, when he's correct. If someone in middle school has to go through this, if they have to deal with being unable to go to a draft because a bunch of adults are trying to scout product, especially when the store hands it out, doesn't cut the shrink wrap on the product, so they just leave the pre-release without even playing, but they have street product now and they can sell it for an inflated rate because clearly street date hasn't hit yet, right? Or you have a situation where you, me, John Commenter knows how EVs and IVs work and how to optimize teams, right? doesn't necessarily mean they know how to optimize teams, and that's a hard balancing act. So I think, yeah, having competitive stuff restricted to the post game or the second Elite Four rematch, I think is an incredibly fair compromise, because you get through the base story, you have access to the game, and if they run into a wall in the second rematch, it's like, well, yeah, do you know what EVs and IVs are? Like, I think that this further showcase that the community surrounding Pokemon definitely has its problems, and ones that I don't think really get resolved.
I get that people getting frustrated and raging at video games can be funny and entertaining, but I personally don't like feeling that way. No. And I don't want a kid to have to feel that way to beat a Pokemon game.
Yeah.
And yes, I understand overcoming challenges can really help people grow, but I don't know about you. As a kid, I didn't want challenge in my Pokemon games. I got enough challenges just living my life. In Pokemon, I wanted to escape to a world in which I could explore and collect and feel cool for kicking ass in battle. And so I feel bad for the kids like me who had to fight this version of Sinnoh's Pokemon League, because it's this brutal, awful thing that keeps you from exploring and collecting more. But even if you disagree with me on the difficulty piece of it, I believe that Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl's other flaws are still enough to make them the worst mainline Pokemon games ever made. If we get future traditional type remakes like this of other regions like Unova, I desperately hope that they learn from the mistakes of these disastrous remakes. Thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, check out my video where I try to logically explain all of the Pokemon type matchups. And for the ones that I can't, I at least give you some fun ways to try to remember them.
We're having fun.
Honestly, I think I agree with this take. I think that everything brought to the table was brought in good faith. I think that while I can say, mechanically like certain things, and I have certain points that I like about BDSP and that I think it did well, and things that I think are good bones of the game, the underground included, right? I think that if we look at the objective understanding that the game is trying to cater to, I guess that's the problem, right? Who is the game catering to? Is it catering to the people who played this 20 years ago? Well, almost 20 years ago, right? Not really, right? Because we've had quality of life since then, and then they've been playing Pokemon since Gen 4, right? So I don't think it's marketed at them. Is it marketed for new players? Like, let's go? Because it's not really even marketed at new players because of the massive difficulty spike at the end that fundamentally checks if you've played the game correctly or not. And you wouldn't know if you're playing the game correctly with EVs, IVs, and training, right? If you don't have that prior knowledge. Is it like I think that him bringing up that there's kind of this conflict of identity, like what is it trying to do exactly? I think that's why I would honestly agree these are probably the worst games. Do I think they have their own merit? Do I think that they can be a fun experience? Absolutely. But I would agree on, yes, if we're looking at this from a divisive standpoint, because the game, I guess, tries to be friend to everybody, but friend to nobody in that regard, tries to appeal to everybody, but doesn't, really specialize in anything. It is just an experience, and it doesn't really know who it's marketing to. I feel it's kind of trying to play it way too safe. I would agree with him on this, but let me know what your thoughts are. Definitely keep it civil. I know a lot of people on these have been really super nice. Haven't really had to really get involved in comments or anything like that. But thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it. Thank you, MandJTV, for having a really good attitude and just a really good faith presentation in regards to BDSP and how it honestly is just kind of the worst of the entries. And hopefully we'll see improvements going forward in the games. But thank you for watching. I will see you all in the next one.